Welcome to Circle Back to You podcast. I'm your host, Jason Wilson. Our guest today is Victoria Rivera, wellness psychotherapist. She empowers you to go from burnout to achieve optimal mental, emotional, and physical health. She's dedicated to fostering collaboration within teams, boosting job satisfaction, and promoting optimal work productivity through comprehensive wellness initiatives. Welcome everybody to Circle Back to You podcast. I'm your host, Jason Wilson. Today I'm joined by Victoria Rivera. How you doing today, Victoria?
I'm doing really well. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you. Victoria was actually our guest speaker at our Freedom Fight Expo, and she did a phenomenal job. If you haven't seen that episode, you got to see that. I'm going to put the link to that talk in our comments after the show. So Victoria, welcome. What was your childhood dream?
Oh, wow. I wanted to be a doctor. And do you want to know why?
Why is that?
Because my mom was a nurse. And when I would write in school, my handwriting was like chicken scratch. And although I practiced and practiced, I wasn't able to get it right. So she would always say, "Oh, you should be a doctor because doctors can't write."
Yeah.
And so then I thought, then it kind of got in my head that I wanted to be a doctor. And that was my childhood dream. And I guess I'm living that dream in many ways, but just in a different way, because of course you don't really know about therapy and therapists as a young child, especially like kind of growing up at the time that I did, which was like
Right.
in the 80s. So I wasn't as ubiquitous as it is now. So so I'm kind of I'm living my dream in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're in the health field, right?
Yeah.
But why were you passionate about mental health and becoming a therapist?
So I did actually want to become a medical doctor, and I went to college, and subsequently I was simultaneously I was taking biology classes, but I was also taking psychology, and psychology was just much more interesting for me. So I ended up taking more psychology classes and majoring in that. And then I went to India. I studied abroad in India. And that really, that actually really shifted my thinking about how culture, society, religion, how all of that impacts us as a human being and our own internal like mental health and wellness, and how important community and connection is. And so that's kind of when I decided, you know what, I think becoming more of a therapist and focusing more on families and community and working with children, like that's kind of where I thought I'd be best suited. So
Okay. All right. Well, a lot of people that go into that field, they have issues that they've dealt with in their own families. I don't know if that's your case, but tell us about that if that was your case.
That's a very complicated question. So many of us, and it's so true, many of us do get into this field because we are trying to work through our own trauma, our own issues, things that we've struggled with within our family and our family unit. There was a lot of things that happened. It's so complicated because I don't want to tell too much about it, because it's not like, we've all had trauma.
Yeah.
And everybody's trauma is different from somebody else's. And so, I could be sitting across the room from somebody where their trauma is just as bad as like what I had, or not as bad, right? But still, like we're all in the room and we're all just, they're trying to heal, and I'm in therapy myself and I'm trying to heal. So we're kind of all like working to get to that part. What I will say is, my parents are both from really big families.
Okay.
So my mom is one of 16.
16?
Yeah, I know.
That's a lot of kids.
Unbelievable. And this was like in upstate New York, like a Catholic family. And then my dad is one of 12.
Wow. Okay.
And he was from Puerto Rico. and so big family there. So that I have to say has impacted me in a very profound way, because having family and different types of personalities and like being able to kind of navigate those dynamics have really helped me in the work that I do now.
Oh, I'm
Um,
sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Well, that lays a foundation for this conversation. We're going to talk about from burnout to wellness. So I'm going to let you take the floor, and I'll chime in here and there.
Okay. Well, one thing is when you hear the word burnout, like what do you think about? Like what comes to your mind?
Well, I wanted to ask you a question about that. Now, the people that you deal with, is the burnout self-imposed, or is it something that they experience from pressure at their jobs, from their bosses?
Hmm.
What have you experienced?
Okay. So, well, first, what I would say is burnout is actually chronic stress that has been just kind of let out the gate. Like we have stress all the time from work, from our personal life, from everything. And when there's chronic stress and people are continuously feeling overwhelmed, exhausted, tired, not able to like take care of themselves and implement like episodes of rest and relaxation and what we call like kind of deliberate relaxation, then that chronic stress gets overwhelming and it turns into burnout. And actually, interestingly enough, in 2019, way before COVID happened, the World Health Organization diagnosed burnout as a syndrome, so as a
Hmm.
problematic issue that was happening mostly in the workplace. And so
Yeah.
there are three things that really constitute burnout. Now it's increased, especially since COVID, but prior to that, it was like having mental exhaustion from like kind of chronic stress, unmanaged stress that turns like that's chronic, not being able to be effective in your work and be productive as you were before, and then having kind of a like a cynical view towards your work and towards life even sometimes.
Hmm.
So those are the like three main factors of like when we knew that somebody was like burnt out and they really needed a break and they really needed to kind of like take care of themselves.
Right.
Now, what we see is that it's not just with work, it's with home, it's with the world and everything that's going on around us. Like a lot of us are feeling kind of cynical, feeling
Yeah.
burnt out, overwhelmed, chronic stress around, just the carrying the burden of that. And to your earlier question, it's not just about like work. We're, as human beings, we are very, very sensitive to our external environment and everything that is happening even within the world that we know about because we're watching the news, or
Mm.
we're hearing people talk about it, or we're reading the news, whatever it is. um that impacts us, and it impacts us profoundly, and a lot of times that's kind of like an invisible stress or invisible um trigger to feeling stressed and burnt out. And I think that when I work with somebody, or when I'm working with employees in particular, like we talk about all these other things that are going on in addition to what's happening with work. Now work can be one of the main factors, but generally it's not the only one, and it often didn't start with just work. It started with like having some difficulty with managing stress and overwhelm at some point in your life in the past too. And I think that's really
Right.
important to like, kind of keep in mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm sure that's exacerbated by trouble in your marriage, trouble with the kids, and
Hmm.
everything else that people are dealing with right now with the financial situation right now, with the economy, and nobody knows what's going to happen with this election in November either. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of reasons to be stressed out right now.
Right. There's a lot of reasons to be stressed out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So let's jump in.
So just, yeah, so to get back to this idea of burnout, when you first heard of this term, like what did you think of, and did you relate to it at all?
When I was in the fitness industry, yeah,
Yeah.
in the fitness industry, industry and sales, particularly, you work a lot of hours. They don't care whether or not it's Thanksgiving, whether it's Christmas, you have to work.
Hmm.
And that's stressful. You can't spend time with your family, and you do get burnt out from that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I experienced that.
Yeah, yeah. So it was the ongoing demands of the job and having to, and then also how that impacted your family and you and the
Sure.
time you were able to spend. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. For a lot of people, that's exactly where, like, what happens is they're feeling so overwhelmed with tasks at work. And, a lot of people that I'm working with now and in the cut with all the companies that I work with, it is really difficult because most people are doing more than one job. They're doing like their job and they're doing maybe two other people's jobs.
Yeah.
And that, and after a while, like, there's nobody who's going to be able to, like, kind of manage that and be able to handle that for a long period of time. I mean, I always like to think about it like, when you're in college or grad school, like, you take classes, you're working, and then you have these like spurts that you really have to like kind of sprint, where you're finishing up like papers all at the same time. You may have three papers, you may have like a quiz or an exam. But the problem is now is that we're sprinting all the time. The
Mm,
projects that like, for some people, not everybody, but for some people, they overlap with each other. And so you're not getting that same kind of like, sprinting and then like rest. You're getting like kind of sprinting, 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 and then there doesn't seem to be an ending. And I think that that's also really discouraging for a lot of people. You can function and manage the stress for a long time, but not forever, right? There needs to
right.
be some sort of like break. And then even for some of the people that I work with, it's like, yeah, there's a break that's coming. Maybe the holidays might be a little bit slower, but the anticipation of knowing that there's going to be more projects, and then there's not going to be like another real break unless you take a vacation. And that's
Yeah.
really, really difficult.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I know that's a huge problem in the States, but down here in South America, with all the executives that, I've taught over the years English at these companies, I mean, they experience a completely different level of burnout. And, I thought it was bad in the States, but I mean, it's really, really bad here too. So, what are some of the things that you recommend for people to have balance in their lives?
Well, before I answer that, what do you think the difference is between the burnout from like in Colombia to here in the U.S.?
Oh my God, I want to tell you. First of all, it's the number of hours that they work. And mind you, there's an expression, madrugar.
Mm-hmm.
Madrugar means get up early. So,
Mm,
I mean, people are on the bus, on public transportation at 5:30, 6 in the morning to get to
right.
the office. And they work until late. I mean, 8, 9, 10 o'clock. And we're talking about executives. We're not talking about, top level executives at
Right.
companies.
Oh,
And then
wow.
on top of yeah, and then on top of that, they're in meetings all day. I mean, like 4, 5, 6 meetings back to back. At
Hmm.
what point do you get your work done? It's impossible. So
So
that adds.
yeah, that's
Yep.
similar to the US. The meetings take up a lot of time and energy, and then
Yeah.
people end up spending their day in meetings, and then what time do they have to do work? Is they go back home, they put their kids to bed, maybe they go for dinner really quickly, and then they go back and they work.
Right. Yeah. In a lot of cases, I would teach my students from, let's say, from 5 until 8, 9 o'clock. Well, after class, they would have to go back to work at home.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. So that's interesting. So there are some similarities. I'm sure people do wake up early here, but maybe not
I
5
mean,
of us.
yeah, they do, but I don't know about the kids though. Like my son, he's on the bus to go to school at 6:30.
Wow,
Uh,
that's
Yeah,
early.
I mean it's crazy.
That is so early. And they start
Yeah,
school what time?
at 7.
Ay, ay, ay. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And they get out.
Well, he gets out at 2:30, 3 o'clock.
That's the same in the States.
Well,
The,
yeah,
the time that they get out, but they start maybe at 8, I think. So a little bit
yeah.
later.
I never started before 8 o'clock. Never.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Oh, that's so interesting.
Yep.
So fascinating. Okay, so the other question that you asked was, how do you go from like kind of being burnt out to having like a sense of balance?
Yes.
Easier said than done. I'm going to tell everybody that. Everybody always wants to have like a short, like, couple things that you could do that will help you to like just change your entire life and you'll just feel better. At the end of the day, all we want really is to feel better. And it's hard to feel better when you're feeling overwhelmed and when you feel stressed. And then when you feel the sense of burnout, it's even more difficult because not only are you burnt out, you're not even at your baseline. And baseline is probably feeling a bit stressed just with like overall daily activities. And
Sure.
so the first thing to really like think about is to recognize that you are feeling that way. I think like having a level of self-awareness is really important in this, and sometimes we're not able to really recognize how much we actually are overwhelmed or how much we are
Mm.
actually feeling that sense of stress or that chronic stress, which is like burnout. So just even having that like self-awareness around how you are actually like feeling, I think I would say that was the kind of number one like baseline thing to recognize. Now, probably most people are like, okay, yeah, I know I feel stressed. I know I feel overwhelmed. And that's great. So recognizing that you have that feeling. And then the second thing is really realizing, well, what are some of the main stressors that are coming at you? And we talked a lot about work, and work is probably one of the main stressors for a lot of people. I think like 60% of employees report that it's their main source of stress.
Right.
We spend much of our time during the day are waking hours at work. So it makes sense that is a big part of our lives, and it can cause a lot of stress and overwhelm. So figuring out, but for some people, it could be family, it could be relationships, it could be a partner that you're with, like kind of figuring out where your stress mainly is coming from. That's also a really important piece of like kind of recognizing what to do. Um, and then there are some specific like things that you can do, and there's a lot of stuff is like takes time,
Yep.
and they're not quick fixes because life is not a quick there's no quick fixes in life, and if
No.
there is, then they're usually addictive.
Right.
And we don't want that. Like, I mean, there are medications that one can take. I love the sun, and like I said earlier, I was telling Jason that it's like 50 something degrees right now in New York.
Cold.
So like being able to like sit and be in the sun is so nice, but it's also is a little distracting. Anyways, so we spend so much time at work, but a part of our stress could also be family, home life, and recognizing where the stress is actually mostly coming from. Those would be the first two things: is self-awareness around how you're feeling. What is it that's happening? Is it stress? Is it overwhelm? Is it frustrated? Is it fear? And then where is it actually kind of coming from? And then there are tips and techniques that we could do. Did you have a question before I went into some of those?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Far away.
Well, is there any other place that you would recognize that could be the world? I was just gonna say, I feel like there's something else I'm missing.
Yeah. Like with the war going on, and I mean, if that doesn't stress you out, then social media can stress you out.
Right.
There's so much negativity on social media; it's ridiculous. And I was watching an interview with Club Shay Shay, Shannon Sharp's
Oh
podcast.
yeah, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So Dion Cole was on recently, and he made the point that why do you follow people and attack them on their social media accounts? If you don't like the person or you don't like what they're doing, unfollow. It sounds like a simple solution, right?
Right.
But people don't do that. I mean, they're so nasty and make awful comments. I don't get it either.
Yeah. Well, because to get back to what we were talking about before, a part of I was just telling one of my patients this: hurt people, right?
Yeah.
So if you're feeling stressed, overwhelmed, hurt, angry, whatever is going on with you, like you're much more likely to project that out to other people
Sure.
and to actually seek out to hurt other people if you are not feeling like great. Now, of course, there's a subset of people who really are like kind of psychopaths who are more narcissistically oriented. And of course, like they're online, they're at work, they're everywhere. You're going to like run into those people. But
Right.
otherwise, other people are really just like frustrated and they're trying to take out their frustrations and anger in ways that are releasing some of that and kind of like giving it to other people. So that energy is kind of like being projected out.
Mm.
And what we have to do as people who are, who don't have that energy, don't want that energy, is really just not like engage and really to be able to, if you can, I know it's really hard, but giving compassion and empathy to that person who obviously is really struggling with something if they're not, if this is what they think the best use of their time is, right?
Right.
Be, mean and nasty. But I would say also too, like I have it in me, you probably have it in you. We all have it in us to like when we get like angry or angsty or somebody says something or does something and we're just like, what? Why would you like say that? And
Yeah.
you write a mean comment perhaps. That kind of also helps you to feel good. We do know that kind of expressing anger and aggression in some ways like is a release for us as humans, and I'm not
Sure.
advocating that one does this, but I'm just saying like a part of understanding why somebody would do something like that and why you might have that urge to do it as a human is knowing that. And I think
Yeah.
that that's kind of like helpful because then you can say, all right, well, obviously this person's got something going on, but then the thing is like if you take it personally or if it impacts you, then you hold on to it and then you want to like give it out.
Yeah. I mean, it can mess your whole day up, right? If you pay too much attention to that.
Right.
So like you said, the best thing to do is just to shut it off,
Yeah.
or don't pay
Yeah.
any attention to it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Don't give it any attention. It's like, the wolf you feed. If you're feeding that wolf of anger, of frustration, of like fear, oftentimes it's fear, then that's the wolf that's going to be the strongest within you. And that's like I think an old Native American or Native people's saying, the wolf.
Mm.
I don't know if you've heard that analogy before or that like story that
No.
there's two. So there's like I was just telling somebody else this recently. There's I think I read it in How to Rewire Your Brain, but it's a story about like a Native American or a Native people's guru who was saying something around, how do you kind of take care of yourself as a human when you have like these anger feelings or these feelings of fear or whatever. And he's like,
Mm.
well, you have two wolves. You have to think of yourself having two wolves. There's one wolf of like love and of empathy and of compassion, and then there's another wolf that kind of thrives on fear and anger and hate. And you have to you're feeding one of these wolves at a time, so
Yeah.
feeding that wolf that is of empathy, compassion, and love is the best thing to do, but it's also understandable the feeding it the hate and the anger because and fear in particular, because those strong like emotions actually uh, we as humans have been biologically programmed to pay more attention to those stronger emotions. So we have
Right.
to actively like feed that wolf of love and of compassion and of empathy. And a part of doing that is like, not paying attention to like comments that may be negative or not looking at stuff online that's going to like trigger us. And it's so hard now, even with the world being what it is. And it's, you want to be informed, but you don't want to be obsessed and
Right.
be inundated with all this negative information around everything that's going on. And it's a challenge because these are people's lives and families and any human who has like empathy and compassion can see like that it's just everything is just like so overwhelming and just very sad.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't help either when you hear of close family members or friends committing suicide and having all kinds of other mental health challenges. That's hard to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's yeah, not getting any better. It's gotten worse over the years. And you would think, well, especially in the US, you would think given mental health services, given all the things that we've been doing, that people would feel less stressed and overwhelmed and less depressed and more connected. But it definitely is unfortunately gotten worse.
Yeah, and I think it's going to get even worse as we go along. But again, this is why I'm so passionate about mental health, and through Circle of Friends Club, I do all these shows, and it's not a vanity thing. I just want to get as much information out there as I possibly can to people.
Yeah.
And if it's every day, it's every day. I mean, people are killing themselves out here, so
Yeah.
that's why I do this. So
Well,
it's a blessing to have you on here.
well, and I do want to share some thoughts about like suicide and suicide ideation and behavior. Well, one is, and this is going to surprise a lot of people, but probably if you really thought about it, at
Hmm.
one point in everybody's life, you would have thought that you maybe didn't want to continue to live. Maybe it
Yeah.
was, like after a really bad breakup, after the loss of somebody who you really loved and cared about, like, a death. Like, we have these thoughts sometimes that, we don't really want to kind of like go on. And oftentimes it really is about the circumstances that we're in. It's not about um, that we can't feel better or things won't get better. It's just that your brain is really kind of short-term focused on like how you feel now. And
Right.
oftentimes when somebody is in that space, they haven't been able to really kind of talk to somebody about it in a way that can help them work through, because I've worked with so many people who've had suicidal thoughts and who've also like attempted in the past, right?
Mm.
And there's a reason, and it's really that they want to be out of that situation. And oftentimes they feel like their situation and themselves are a burden to other people.
Right.
And when you feel that way, then it makes you even feel like, okay, well, why do I want to kind of continue on? And so a big part of that is like, there's again, like, there's a spectrum of this, but at the like highest end is like somebody who's in that position really just needs to be like helped. They need to maybe be hospitalized. They need to definitely talk to a clinician, somebody who can kind of help them and make an assessment about where they need to be. And especially if
Right.
they have access to firearms or any kind of like dangerous like pills or anything like that, because there could be a space where their willpower to kind of continue is so limited that they end up doing something to harm themselves. And I think like recognizing that these are moments in time, and just like anything, you can feel better in the future. It doesn't feel like you'll feel better, but you will. And it's just
Yeah.
that sometimes you just need to have like you just need to have support around you to help you to get through that moment. And I think a lot of people are kind of scared around that and scared to talk about it, and will end up like maybe doing something that they regret. But if they're able to open up to somebody and connect and get the help and support, they'll find that the pain can end in a way where they're able to live their lives and feel better about who they are.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think getting help and having the ability to open up about what they're thinking or feeling, especially when it comes to those constant bombardments of these kinds of negative thoughts to their mind every single day. And we're talking about 24 hours a day, 7 days a week that these people are having these kinds of thoughts. So,
Hmm.
yeah, having that ability to talk about it definitely can free you up and possibly heal you.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know who
Yeah.
Eckhart Tolle is?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you are familiar with his story, but he was also suicidal too.
Mm.
This is
Didn't
actually
know
what
that.
yeah, yeah. This is actually what made him. So if you don't know who he is, He is this like kind of spiritual leader, guru. If you look him up on YouTube, you'll find him. I mean, I think he's amazing. He's just such a very kind and calming demeanor and man. And it's just so great to like kind of hear. He really does like, I'm kind of spiritual. He really does like somebody's speaking through him. Like something is happening. Something bigger is happening through this man. And he tells the story of how he got there, which was that he was feeling so depressed, so despondent and suicidal, and he wanted to kill himself. And then he thought, well, wait a minute. I'm saying I want to kill myself. So there is a different part of me. And he started to recognize that there was a separation between the I and myself. And he started to say, so I'm not thinking, I think I want to kill myself, but myself doesn't want to die. That's interesting. Yeah. And then he starts to kind of like get into this, like, he has like a kind of an enlightenment around who consciousness and who he is and what are his thoughts and how his thoughts are kind of influenced by his feelings, and his feelings of feeling so miserable and uncomfortable with his life and disappointed with himself in all these different ways. And then being able to say to himself, well, if I want to do that to myself, if I want to kill myself, what can I do to kind of make things different and better? And then that's where he kind of goes on his like he kind of has an awakening in a spiritual, like kind of consciousness in a way. And I think like, if we notice, like, again, like I said, like probably most of us have had those thoughts at one point in time, and that's what they are. They're thoughts, and they're connected to a feeling of, feeling not that you don't feel great or well, and that you have like you were saying, a lot of those negative thoughts. And sometimes a lot of times actually, they are persistently overwhelming.
Yes.
And sometimes it's hard to get out of that, but there's like a detangling of it. And that's what he's referring to, a detangling of himself with those thoughts. And I think that that's really, really important to work through and work on if you ever are having any kind of actually depression and even anxiety and even this like sense of burnout too, like being able to kind of detangle some of this stuff.
So fascinating, Victoria. We got to close out, but would you like to come back to the show? I mean, this has been awesome having you here.
Yes. I mean, I didn't give the specific tips, but we'll do it next time.
Yeah, we got to do a part 2. I mean,
right. Well, so the homework is I always give my patients homework and my employees homework. Homework is, what are the things, when are you feeling stressed and overwhelmed, and what are the things that are triggering it? I think those are the 2 key takeaways today. And then we'll talk about ways to manage it the next time.
Awesome. Sounds good. So how can people find you on social media? Do you have a website?
I do. So it's wellnesspsychotherapistnyc.com. That's my website. I also have LinkedIn, so you can always contact me on LinkedIn. And I also have an Instagram where I post weekly Wellness Wednesdays on all things mental health, tips on how to take care of yourself, burnout, mental health, any kind of issue around mental health and wellness. And that's at Wellness Psychotherapist on Instagram.
Awesome. We will have all of that information in our show notes after the show. So I'm going to include that. And I do want to acknowledge David Jones. He was in the audience. He said, great information and topic. Oh, thank you so much, David. We appreciate you being here. So we will be back next week, and we need to schedule another time for part 2, Victoria.
Okay. Yep. Sounds good. Anytime.
Awesome. All right. So we're going to close out. Ladies and gentlemen, have a wonderful rest of your day and week ahead. God bless you, and take care.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks for watching Circle Back to You podcast. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. See you next week.